Now, before I start the video, I have one serious statement to make. The iPhone XR is still one of my favorite iPhones of all time, and let me tell you why. Now, the reason that I personally love the iPhone XR so much is because basically back in the day, I was rocking with Android heavy. I didn't rock no other phone, I was Android for life. And after my iPhone 5S, which was basically my first iPhone ever, I basically became a Samsung fanboy, and after a while, I decided to give Apple another chance, and I ended up with the iPhone XR. And it's a really great phone that I had a great time with. It basically was a cheaper version of the XS, but it had the best battery, exact same software, and I really don't care what anyone says. The display is 720p, but it really doesn't look bad at all in person. It has a very powerful A12 Bionic chip that is powerful enough to handle most current apps smoothly. It has an amazing battery life that is still able to last me for most of the day with no problem. It has a pretty good display that in person still looks pretty good, and it supports iOS 16, so you're pretty up to date in terms of software. And even though there are many great things about the iPhone XR, it's not perfect, and it has given me some minor problems along the way. The display is 720p, and it hits much harder since video quality has improved over the years. The battery life is good, but it's definitely gotten worse since the newer phones came out. And also, since newer phones have come out, the device definitely has gotten slower since I first had it. But believe it or not, I do believe that there are many people out there who will like the iPhone XR, and hopefully this video will help you decide whether or not it's right for you. Now, starting with design, the iPhone XR has a very round look around the edges while simultaneously having the same front as the iPhone 12, and I really love it since it made me reminisce on the older times of the iPhone. And right here, you can see the rounded frames, and I feel like it's much more comfortable than say the 13 or the 14, and it's also much easier to grip, which means that you're less likely to drop it, and I really do like the aesthetic. And besides the bubbly details implemented, this phone looks the exact same as the iPhone 14 from the power button, volume rockers and mute switch, all the way down to the speakers, lightning port, and the only difference is the back because the iPhone 11 has 2 cameras and the iPhone XR only has 1. Now, looking at its color, the version that I have is black, and I really think that this is the cleanest black that we've seen on an iPhone, just like the iPhone 11, and it basically has the same black as the iPhone 11 with the matte black sides along with a true glass back that gives it that right amount of depth and resulted in a really good looking device. Now, looking at display, the iPhone XR has a 6.1 inch liquid retina display that looks just like the iPhone 11, which means that in terms of visual experience, it's not the best, but it still looks really good. Whenever I was scrolling through my phone, it looked very sleek, everything looked nice, the responsiveness was very precise, and I had no complaints about the overall feel. The 60Hz refresh rate on the display still looks really good. 120Hz displays weren't as common back then, so I will give the XR a pass. And I will say that the 60Hz on the iPhone 11, XR, 12, 13, and 14 feel very smooth, and I really didn't have any complaints about it. But whenever I was scrolling through apps, you could tell the frame rate drop on some apps like Eventbrite and many others, but in most apps it was fine, so I really didn't have any complaints. Now, looking more into the display, the bezels are pretty small. Right here, you can see that they're wrapped nicely around the screen and are much cleaner overall. The notch is wider than the iPhone 13 and 14, but it still wasn't that noticeable and didn't really bother me at all. Now, when it comes to brightness, the iPhone XR is at 625 nits, which is almost 200 less nits than the iPhone 13 and 14, and I really noticed the difference when I was outside. I really had trouble seeing the screen, and because I live in LA, there's less shade, so there were many times where I couldn't see at all when the sun was out. Now, when it comes to the size of the iPhone XR, I can't tell you guys whether or not you will love it or hate it, but I do want to list some pros and cons so that you can know what to look out for. Now, the pros of having a nicely sized screen is that the viewing experience is still really good. It's very easy to use compared to bigger iPhones where I would struggle to reach the top of the screen, and it fits in my pocket much easier no matter the size of my pants. And the only con is that it's not as big as the Plus or Pro Max, so the viewing experience won't be as good. But if I'm being honest, the iPhone XR is really not that small, so there really weren't any true cons. But again, I want to let you guys decide if the pros are worth the purchase because everyone's needs are different. Now, the resolution and viewing experience of the iPhone XR's display is okay at best. It was great back then, but looks pretty average now. But besides that, I was still able to see everything very clearly when watching videos. Playing games on it was as fun as ever, and I wanted to give you guys an idea of what it would look like to watch something and play a game. Now, the iPhone XR has a 2900 mAh battery that is pretty close to the iPhone 14's 3200 mAh battery, and the battery on the iPhone XR was easily able to last me for most of the day, with a little help of course. And mind you, I'm the type of person who's on my phone planning videos, writing scripts, texting friends, on social media, watching movies, and anything else that the average person would do on their phone. And I'm usually getting about 5 hours of on-screen time a day. You know, usually I would put it on power saving mode, but most of the time I was still using it to the max and it performed pretty well, besides me having to charge it twice a day. And if I could give you guys a quick estimate, I would say that my battery is usually on 10% by the end of the day, which is really good. But again, I had a lot of battery health along the way. And right now my battery health is at 78%, which hopefully keeps up longer. I really wish the battery health on iPhones were a little bit better, especially since charging isn't anything special. Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch on when it came to battery was the charging. And if I'm being honest, the charging isn't that great in terms of speed. It will take me well over an hour to get to 100%. And the battery has downgraded over the past couple of years, so keep a portable charger on you. Now, looking at software, the XR supports iOS 16, and just like on any other iPhone, you have the app drawer that holds and categorizes all your apps. You have the new wallpaper system that is a huge upgrade and feels much smoother on this phone, and you have many other minor things that makes the phone feel even sleeker. But again, just because all of this stuff is designed to be sleeker doesn't mean that it'll be reliable on a day-to-day basis. Like, there were many times where my iPhone XR would freeze on me, and it would happen at pretty important times, like whenever I'm at work or in the car. But besides those frequent freezes, most of the time the XR did work very well in terms of software, and I think you guys will be really happy with it. And on a side note, the iPhone XR is very similar to the iPhone 11, 12, and 13. So again, as far as software, you'll get a very similar experience. And I also decided to test out some games on the XR. I play Asphalt 9, which is a game that can really test out the chip. And as you can see, it held up very well, and I didn't really get any lags along the way. Now, just like most other iPhones, the haptics weren't that great if I'm being honest. There were many times where I would put my phone on vibrate, but I would miss out on some messages because I couldn't hear it. So overall, I would say that just like most iPhones, they're pretty much a downgrade. And now the final thing that I wanted to note is that the iPhone XR will be getting around 1 to 2 more years of software upgrades. So when it comes to longevity, it's definitely coming down, but it's still got you covered. Now, just like the iPhone 11, the iPhone XR has some pretty good speakers for its time, but I found that they don't really hold up as well as I wanted them to. And since I work from home, I will usually use the speakers when I'm in the house, so I really didn't get no outside noise like that, but it still was pretty mid. Like, basically, once you turn the volume all the way up, the audio is pretty crappy, but once it's to that mid to lower tier volume, it's okay. It's not great, it's not good, it's alright. So personally, I would suggest that, you know, if you are with your friends, let them use their phones to play music out loud, because this ain't it. And I also tested out how they sounded when playing music, and if I'm being honest, they're loud, but the quality isn't the greatest when it gets to the max. And I also tested my XR as my alarm, and I had no problem waking up to it. I didn't have to set multiple alarms, and I didn't really have to worry too much about receiving important notifications whenever I turned on my ringer. Now, the iPhone XR has a 12 megapixel main camera along with a 12 megapixel front, and based on my usage over the past couple of years, I will say that the pictures still look amazing. Now, the XR doesn't have any zoom modes like the iPhone 11 and up, so if you are someone who doesn't really use zoom modes, that is an added benefit to the XR because you really won't need it. But it's also the reason why I do recommend the 11 or the 12 over the XR, because in terms of camera, it does have less options. The shutter speed was very good from the start. I decided to test this out by shooting moving cars, and as you can see right here, the camera was able to capture most cars beautifully, no matter how fast they were going, so I was pretty satisfied. Next up, I wanted to show you guys how the camera performed in different environments, and the first environment that we're going to go with is daytime. Now, starting with the outside photos, we can see that they have a really great shadow of depth whenever I'm taking pictures of myself, along with a very nice blur, and this is scaled all the way up once I use the portrait mode that Apple has always been pretty good at. I also took some photos of random street objects, the sky, different aspects of nature, and I can honestly say that the iPhone XR held up very well in these environments, and I'm really impressed. Now, taking a look at inside photos, the iPhone XR was able to capture everything very nicely, and I found the pictures to be slightly more detailed than the previous iPhones in terms of sharpness. Even when taking selfies, you can see how the camera handles already good lighting to produce an overall nicely taken photo. My skin tone looked really good, and the sharpness was at its peak. And now when it comes to shooting video, the XR is easily one of the best older phones that you can buy in this price range. You have many different modes and frame rates to choose from, starting at HD up to 4K. And in terms of frame rate, you have 24, 30 and 60. And if you guys like my footage, I shoot my videos at 4K at 30 frames per second, which is what you're looking at now. And I really like it because 60 frames is too smooth for me, so I decided to shoot at 30, and 4K is just a really sharp and clean resolution. Now the video stabilization was out of this world. Again, I shoot videos with my phone, so whenever I'm shooting my subject, I can use everything handheld and the movements will be very smooth, which was pretty impressive. So all in all, I would definitely say that the iPhone XR has an amazing video camera that'll give you some really good shots. So if you're someone who wants to shoot content or you just want a solid camera, the XR has got you covered. And also, here's some extra videos that I was able to get. So here's the final question. Is the iPhone XR a good phone to buy in 2023? Well, I would say that the iPhone XR is an amazing phone that holds up really well, and I do think that you should buy it in 2023 because just like the iPhone 12, 13, and 14, it has a pretty good battery that can last you for a good part of the day. It has a really nice display that is very identical to newer iPhones. It has a great build quality that has lasted me nicely up until this point, and it supports the latest versions of iOS, so in terms of software, you're pretty much up to date. And if you are someone who does prefer the iPhone XR, it's definitely a phone that you'll be satisfied with, and it has that really cheap price tag, so that's an added benefit. But there it is, my review on the iPhone XR. And also, if you guys have any extra questions for me regarding the iPhone XR, 11, 12, 13, 14 plus, just let me know down in the comments and I will get right back to you. But if you made it to the end of the video, I would like to thank you, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Peace.